Not all speaking engagements are the same. Here's the thing, if you think all speaking engagements are the same, you're a speechist. Don't be a specious. I don't know if that's a real word, but the important thing to realize is not every speaking engagement is the same. I'm gonna break down why, and if you can understand the differences between the kinds of speaking engagements that exist, then you're gonna be able to leverage them more powerfully for your business. So here's the thing that I want you to get. Not all speaking engagements are created the same. I didn't know this. For the longest time, I thought the sole purpose of a speaking engagement was to go out there and impact lives. And that was the sole goal. And that is typically a keynote presentation. Now, when I first started speaking, this was almost 2 decades ago, honestly, I thought every speaking engagement was go out, impact lives, call it a day. What I didn't understand is that there's actually different kinds of speaking engagements. The first kind of speaking engagement is what most people know about, right? And that is the keynote. Now, let me explain what the keynote is. And by the way, that is my handwriting. I never really learned how to write nicely growing up, so it just stayed with me. As long as you can read it, that's all that matters. Don't be judging me. I know how y'all be doing. Judgy McJudgers. Okay, so the keynote. The keynote is the presentation that most of us think of as that 45-minute to 60-minute presentation, maybe sometimes even 75 minutes, where you go up on a stage in front of maybe hundreds of people and you deliver an idea. That is a different skill set than a different kind of presentation, which is what's called the workshop. Okay, I want you to understand the difference. The workshop typically is longer in nature. That's about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So this one typically is about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. This one's about 90 minutes to 2 hours on average, okay? The timing changes the way that you interact with these two. Well, there's a third kind of presentation. That's called the training, okay? This is different than the workshop, which is different than the keynote. The training can be anywhere from 4 hours to a full day, okay? Now, let me break down not only the time differences of each one of these presentations, but what you're supposed to achieve as your objective. Because a lot of people are great at being a workshop because maybe they're a great facilitator, but they feel like they stink at being a keynote speaker because they don't know how to be, wildly charismatic and move people. And the workshop and the keynote speaker could suck at being a trainer because they're not used to doing trainings. They're like, I can only speak for an hour. And by the way, for some people, speaking for an hour feels like forever, but watch some more of our videos and it won't feel that way. So let's break down the difference between these three. So the keynote's main objective, the main objective of the keynote is to shift the perspective of the audience. This is big. It's not necessarily to teach them how to do very, very specific things. It's about getting them to think differently. A good keynote presentation gets people to think differently than when they came in, okay? Now, what happens with a workshop? The point of a workshop is to give people specific skills, okay? Now, when you think about skills, think about it like this. The first part of your workshop, let's say you're doing a 2-hour workshop, could actually be that keynote portion where you get someone to look at the world in a new, different way. Now, the workshop, that other 30 to 60 minutes of your presentation, is about them applying those skills in the real world. Now, here's why this is interesting. A lot of people say to me, oh, but Arel, why would I want a keynote that doesn't give me skills? Isn't that a waste of time? No, not at all. Because a good keynote isn't about having people sit down and do writing exercises for 45 minutes of the keynote presentation. That's more appropriate for a workshop. It's not appropriate for a keynote because typically a keynote's in front of a whole bunch of people. So there's a different energy dynamic and there's a different way you need to handle that kind of audience. A workshop typically is a smaller number of people. So let's say, just for hypothetical purposes, a keynote, you might be in a room full of, say, 100 people, okay? Low numbers. This might be a room full of, say, 50 people, Okay, so it's less people because the amount of interactions and exercises they're gonna do, you can bring people up on stage, talk about what it's gonna be, and what the exercises you are. And the reason why this is important is because in a keynote, you have 45 to 60 minutes. It's actually not a lot of time. If you spend 20 minutes having people write down answers to an exercise and reflect, you just cut into like, a third of the time you have to speak. So that extra time that you have available in a workshop gives you the opportunity to do more hands-on, more writing, more reflection, more what's called pair and share and those kind of things. Now, the training is a different beast altogether because this is all about what I like to call the nitty-gritty, okay? The nitty-gritty. Okay, so a training is more for, let's say you have a software and you want people to use that software and you want them to be excellent at it. You might sit down and spend a whole day with them, showing them how to use it, being very, very specific. So again, you might start with the keynote, then you might start with some exercises, but now you're actually gonna show people how to do things. Now, if you were doing a leadership training, that's not software or technology. Let's say you want to do leadership speaking as an example, okay? So the keynote would be, these are the philosophies and ideas that I believe make leadership work. For now, the big idea that I want you to get is that the keynote is about sharing the philosophies and ideas that you have that will shift someone's perspective, okay? When you move to the workshop, you're sharing these philosophies here, but then you're giving them exercises. Let's go over a scenario. How might you handle this? How do these strategies show up in your life? When was a time these strategies showed up for you and didn't show up for you? I'm spending more time to ingrain in you this philosophy and how you can use this leadership in the real world, okay? If I'm going down to the nitty-gritty of a training, say 4 hours, a full day, multiple days. Some people do like 5-day trainings, right? What I'm gonna do is shift their perspective. We're gonna go over specific skills, but now we're gonna do a lot of like role-playing situations. Okay, I'm gonna put you into this situation and I'm gonna have you act it out. This is just as an example. There's many different ways to do it, but this is a good way to do that. So let's make this real. Let's say I'm a leadership speaker, and I believe that the single greatest way to succeed as a leader is to create a team environment, okay? And I'm just kind of shooting from the hip here, just for illustrative purposes. So team environment. So my whole keynote is explaining why creating a team environment is important, why most companies don't create team environments. They actually create the opposite, where they create employees who have infighting and are adversarial. So people become competitors instead of companions. They become enemies instead of teammates. And I break it all down. And then I explain how you can get people in your group to see why creating this team mentality is the most important thing we can do in our leadership role. That's a good keynote. If I'm doing a workshop, I'm still doing this content, but now I'm gonna give them examples. I want you to now self-reflect. So I want you to write down, when was a time you felt like you were in a team environment? What were the components of it? How did that look? Then I'm gonna say, hey, let's think about a time that you were not in a team environment. What was a job or a leadership role where it was all this infighting? What were all the characteristic traits? Let's flesh that out. That kind of work would be really good within a workshop. Now, if I'm doing a training, I might say, okay, let's talk about one of those examples. Now, I might pull someone up, and let's say one of the examples, they say, when I first started as the CEO of this company, I inherited a group of people where no one wanted to share ideas because they were afraid that by sharing these ideas, someone would steal them, and no one wanted to share ideas because they were afraid that their teammates would steal their ideas. Okay, great. So now I'm gonna teach them how to handle and deal with the environment, and then we're gonna go ahead and role play. Now I have the time and the ability to do that in training because I have hours. So here's what's cool. A lot of people say, oh, Raul, how would you do a 4-hour presentation? How would you do a 6-hour presentation? A lot of the time gets taken up because of this nitty gritty. Think about it. If I say, let's act out a situation, now I can ask them, well, how were you feeling in that conversation? What was uncomfortable about it? Okay, you said this, let's try this again and say that. They go through this scenario again. How did that feel? Okay, how could you use this differently? Now, where do you predict yourself using it? Okay, let's create that. And then you literally bring someone up and walk them through different scenarios and give them the nitty gritty and show them how they can apply this leadership skill set in the real world. And you take your time to answer their questions, work them through it so that they truly get how to integrate the philosophy and perspective that you're teaching them into the skill set that they have. And then they get to practice it through the nitty gritty exercises. You can take a keynote that maybe is only 45 minutes and just add an element where you're having people self-reflect and practice this in a self-reflection form, and it turns it into a workshop. And then you can have people do nitty-gritty stuff where they role play and you give them scenarios and you express how they're feeling and you walk them through what went right, what went wrong, how to make it better. And that same concept, boom, boom, boom. Now, if you have the skill set of a trainer and you're really good at that nitty-gritty, and you're really good at helping people work through stuff, and you try to put that into a 45-minute keynote, that's a snooze fest, baby. Because you haven't built the rapport, you only have 45, 60 minutes, maybe 70 minutes, right, if you're lucky. But you gotta build rapport, you gotta get people connected to you, you gotta get them believing in your idea. There's this whole process you have to do to just get people to buy into your ideas as a good presenter. So if you go straight into the nitty-gritty, jump and drop, people they're gonna snooze. And even though it's good content, it ain't gonna work. And I'll give you an example of how this works. Okay, now focus. What if you're watching this video right now? Maybe you're clipping your toenails. I don't know. Maybe you're doing something else. Maybe you're watching this on your computer and you're looking at your phone, scrolling. You know how you do on social media. You know how we do. This is what we do, baby. I'm aware of that. I know that you do that. I'm not mad at you. I'm just saying, focus for a second. Here's why. There are some videos you watch where you have to pay 100% to the audio in the video, right? For example, if you were trying to change an outlet on your wall because your outlet wasn't working, that's a training video. That's nitty gritty. Do you understand that? So you have to watch the video and listen to it. They're gonna tell you how to take off the wall mount. I don't even know if that's the right word, but we're gonna call it the wall mount, and how to look at the wires and how to fuse the wires and so that's nitty gritty. But if you're looking at a general idea on how to be more handy, like some maybe hacks, that's more of the workshop, like, oh, here's a cool hack on how to be handy around the house. And then the keynote is more about the idea of why anyone who's not handy can actually be handy if they understand these three concepts about what it means to be handy. So if you think about how you observe your own medium of, say, social media, that nitty-gritty training video needs fully 100% of your attention, and that takes a lot of cognitive ability. So you've got to be locked in for it. If I'm doing a workshop, that's more like hacks. That's like cool. Like I could watch a video on like 15 hacks on how to get 15 hacks around my house, and I'm not watching them to actually do anything. I mean, think about it. How many of y'all, be honest with me, how many of y'all ever watched a fitness video, but you didn't actually work out when you was watching it? Huh? You ever do that? You ever watch hacks on like 15 hacks that you could do around your house and you go, oh, that's super cool, but you don't actually do it? That's kind of like a little bit more in the workshop. You could do it, but you could not. It's kind of like a workshop, right? And a keynote is more buying into this idea that that idea is possible. And if you saw yourself as someone who wasn't handy, you can become handy if you understand these three simple principles. And now if I'm bought into the idea of being handy, maybe I can believe I can get some of these hacks done. And if I believe that, maybe I can go ahead and get into the nitty gritty and change some wall sockets. So the same way you would look at content differently, depending upon, I'm talking about social media content, like on YouTube or whatever it might be, based on what your needs are and what you're doing, that changes the way the kind of video occurs to you. Because this video needs all of your attention. A keynote, you could probably do something else and still listen to it and still get something out of it because you're changing your thoughts and perspective. This is a little bit more hands-on, this is super hands-on. So I want you to understand that not every presentation is created equal. You have to understand what the goals and what people are trying to ask of you. Because if I used to make this mistake, I'd do a 4-hour training, and I would do 4 hours of keynote. That's wrong. That's not a good training if I'm just trying to change someone's perspective for 4 hours. So I, as a presenter, needed to come with different skill set, different exercises, different ways to engage my audience, keep their energy high, different hands-on activities to demonstrate the philosophies that I wanted to share with them. I didn't know this for a long time. I made a lot of mistakes. So hopefully you won't have to make this mistake because you now have this idea, this perspective.
Hey, if you like that video, make sure you hit that like button before you go and hit the subscribe button so you can get more of our great content so it goes to the top of the algorithm. And if you head over to Talkadot.com, not only will you get more in-depth resources there to help you with your speaking, but also you'll be able to get a free account for our amazing software tool that helps speakers like you pull leads from your speaking engagements, get data so you can actually have objectifiable information on why you're so good at what you do, and how to use that data to book more speaking engagements. If you want to find out what Talkadot is, head over to Talkadot.com. And remember, if you want to talk a lot, head over to Talkadot. See what I did there? Just go to the website. Trust me, it'll make more sense when you're there. I'll see you at the next video.